Hey folks, hope everyone's doing well. I've been working on this kind of fairly deep dive into the Gospels, making an affirmative case for them. It's something that I hope to get out here very shortly. Really excited about it. But in the meantime, I wanted to just take a quick break and talk about this video that came across my feed yesterday from Dr. Sean McDowell's channel. I really like his channel. A lot of stuff that he does, I really like. This video, he's interviewing a professor from Biola University, Professor Doug Axe, and they're talking about the issue of intelligent design. Professor Axe is a leading intelligent design advocate. I thought it would be good for me to spend a little bit of time on this, given my background, and just discuss a bit about why I have the issues that I have, the points of view that I have, and sort of where that came from, how my sort of undergrad and sort of medical training and background kind of steered me to where I am. And so I wanted to use this video to kind of launch into that and discuss a few things, because I think where we are right now in the discussion of theism versus science, I think there is more overlap than either camp is willing to permit. And so with that, let me just kick the video off, and then I'll just pause here and there as we continue our discussion.
What is the state of the intelligent design movement? How has the conversation about origins shifted in our culture and in the church? Well, we've got the perfect guest today, because he's not only a Biola professor, Doug Axe, but has also written a book on intelligent design called Undeniable.
What's at stake is your posture toward science.
Can we just make peace with Darwin and move on?
Is there something particularly and profoundly important about humanity with respect to the rest of life? A lot of people who are believers aren't happy with this call to make peace with Darwinism, because they say there's something huge at stake here. We cannot just brush this off and carry on as Darwinists. Why would a Christian feel as though they need to make concessions to what I consider to be one of the weakest, most pathetic scientific theories that has ever come out in the history of science? I'm on record saying that.
So good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here.
Well, let me just start in.
Okay, folks, I just want to pause here. So I just want to take a second here to discuss one of the claims made here by Professor Axe, and probably one of the things that I disagree with him most on. I think we probably have a lot of areas of real agreement, but there's one that I just categorically disagree with him on, and that's with respect to Darwin's theory of evolution and being one of the worst theories ever put forth. That just is categorically wrong. I cannot really underline enough how much I disagree with that. Now, I think I know where he's going, and I think I know why he's saying it, and I believe, again, without having spoken with him, I believe his position on this is going to be more how Darwin's theory of evolution is being used today by sort of the mainstream scientific community. But what we have to do with Darwin is we have to go back to the time, to the period in the 1800s when Darwin was writing, the period before we knew anything about DNA, the period before we had real concept of what an atom was or anything like that, and just marvel at the genius of Darwin for that time period. Prior to Darwin, the widely held view in all areas of science was that the complexity and the diversity that we see of life on Earth had to have come from a higher being. This was really not debated. Again, to be fair, Darwin wasn't really the first one to challenge that. I think historians are get to point that out. But certainly, he was the first to do it with any kind of gravitas or widespread influence in his sort of landmark work on Origin of Species. Prior to Darwin, that was a widely held view. It must have come from a divine being and particularly in the Western world, that was the Christian God. And what Darwin hypothesized was that, at least with respect to evolution of species, okay, so not origin. And Darwin is very clear that his theory does not cover the origin of life. This is really important. There's some evidence in the record that Darwin may have, later in his life may have, thought about ways to sort of expand to origin, but certainly on the origin of species, it's clear that it's not covering the origin of life, how life originally got here, abiogenesis, etc. But on the evolution of life after it's already here in the natural world that we could observe, Darwin had the insight to say, hey, what if every single sort of evolutionary change we see could be the result of just purely random processes? No cause, no external influence, no designer, nothing. Just entirely stochastic, random processes happening naturally, where just the stress and the strain and the competitiveness of the environment allows for natural mutations to take place, and those natural mutations that confer some type of survival benefit will continue to propagate, and those where that survival benefit is not present will over time be selected against. And so through this process of just purely natural selection, over time we see this gradual development of species. We see gradual lengthening of a neck, or gradual coloration of skin, or gradual lengthening of beaks, etc. This insight is just profoundly brilliant. I think it's one of the most brilliant scientific theories ever put down. It is so shockingly brilliant for the time and against the grain. And again, and maybe someone else had some insight to this before, but the concept itself is pure genius. I think it's unfair to characterize it otherwise. With that said, there are holes in the theory. There are holes. Again, Darwin didn't know what DNA was. Darwin really had very little insight into what even was in a cell and the complex machinery in a cell. And there have been others who've explored the fact that, including Darwin, that there were potential holes in his theory. One of those being this sudden explosion of diversity of complex life in the Cambrian period, where we suddenly saw a new amount of wide-ranging complex species without the expected precursor interval species in the fossil record that we'd expect to see to lead to life, to lead to that life. Darwin recognized this, and that problem persists, and it was unlikely to ever be resolved. Now, that does not mean God. I think this is where sort of the vitriol comes in from the scientific community. That doesn't mean, okay, well, because of that gap, therefore there's God. I'm not saying Professor Axe is arguing that, or any other intelligent designer, but I just feel like it's important to lay out that those deficiencies, and there are some other ones, don't in any way undermine the genius of Darwin's theory for the time it was put forth. It's pure genius. I challenge you to find a better, more impactful theory than Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection anywhere in the history of science. Honestly, I mean, it's got to be up there with the best and most impactful and most brilliant of all time. Okay, so let's get back into the video here.
And before we talk about some of the cultural shifts that have taken place, there's still a lot of confusion about what intelligent design is. So what is it, and how is it different and or similar from, say, young Earth creationism and old Earth creationism?
Yeah, there's similarities and differences. Both young Earth creationism and old Earth creationism are embarking on the project of trying to reconcile scientific results to Scripture. And therefore, they contradict each other. Young Earth says the Earth is young, old Earth says the Earth is old. So you can't be both. But both people in both of those camps are actually intelligent design advocates. They may not say that because ID is not really about making that reconciliation between scientific results and Scripture. It's about just using science and asking, does the science say either that we are cosmic accidents or that we are the products of divine creation? And it lands on the side of we are the products of divine creation. So it's that simple.
So this is a good point to pause here. And I think, as I touched on at the outset, we have these camps, right? So we have young Earth creationism, old Earth creationism, and intelligent design. As I've said, previously, I'm not a creationist, young Earth or old Earth. I don't make the effort to try to map on scientific understanding to the Book of Genesis or to the Old Testament. I don't disparage people who do. I hope it's realized I don't disparage. Hopefully, I try not to disparage anyone. I disparage bad arguments. Mercilessly. I have very little tolerance for bad arguments when people should know better. But in terms of the people and of people who devote their lives to this and have their belief system centered around these things, I have no issue with those who identify as creationist, and I also have no issue with those who identify in the other way, who say there's no God, there's not any of that. It's all totally made up. Again, I'm fine with that if you're basing that on your own personal belief and not trying to present an argument for it. Because if you present an argument for it, I'm going to absolutely massacre them, unless they're based on something. But yeah, if you want to hold that belief because that's a belief that you have, and you're more than welcome to that. I don't have a problem with that either. Now, what I will say is that the area of intelligent design is also an area that I don't squarely align with. And I think this, some people asked me in a previous video and felt it was confusing when I said, hey, I'm not an intelligent designer, I'm not a creationist, but I do believe that God created all life. People say, well, then what are you? And I admit it's a bit complicated. And I say I probably don't rigidly fall into a camp. I'm somewhere in between the camp of intelligent design and theistic evolution, which we'll get to here in a bit. But before doing that, let me just take a second to talk about intelligent design, because I think what is misunderstood about intelligent design, again, I'm separating this from creationism, is that there's this belief in the scientific community, certainly on any mainstream college campus, scientific campus, intelligent design is absolutely it's the devil. It's the if you come with this argument, you will be pushed out of the room, mocked out of the room, laughed out of the room. It's considered pseudoscience. It's considered completely false, a Trojan horse to backdoor Christianity into arguments, etc. That's what a lot of people argue. I won't say it's entirely without merit, but I do believe that most intelligent designers, and certainly the real preeminent Dr. Stephen Meyer, Dr. Behe, I would include Dr. Axe or Professor Axe in this group of people who I think are all of whom are Christian, but all who argue intelligent design from the perspective of scientists. I think it's unfair. It's unfair, and it's pure ad hominem to say because they're Christian, everything that comes out of their mouths is suspect or false. That's just terrible reasoning. Again, if you come to me with those arguments, I am going to obliterate them. They're just bad arguments. I don't recognize them. They don't work with me. You may not care what I think, but anyone like me is just gonna destroy that. That you cannot have in a scientific debate. Your arguments rest on pure ad hominem fallacies. Where ad hominem being because you're a Christian, anything that comes out of your mouth must be wrong. Likewise, again, someone who is an atheist, just because they're an atheist doesn't mean that they can't, that we have to then question their scientific viewpoints either. I think that's also wrong, right? So, but if you go to any campus, been to, attended and been to, many of the, great campuses, prestigious campuses in the United States, and you bring up intelligent design, you're going to be absolutely mocked out of the room as a pseudoscientist. And I think that's wrong, because I think what the intelligent design argument is really trying to say is that what Professor Axe is getting at here, which is that there are really only two explanations for particularly the issue of the origin of life. Only two. Okay? Either everything happened randomly, purely randomly, uncaused, no creator, no designer, purely randomly, or was not random. Random or not random. That's it. Those are the choices. Please don't try to come and argue anything else. That's it. Those are the only two choices. And so if it's random, then it needs to be entirely random. Hopefully this is understandable to anyone who forgets the math, right? It's like, if it's random, that means there can't be any external influence on it. Once there's external influence on it, once there's anything kind of leaning on or pressing on, it's not random anymore. It's biased. And then it's not random. And so if it's not random, it's biased somehow. And what that bias is, intelligent creator, personal creator, not personal creator, God who sort of kick-started everything and then sort of left and said, hey, you guys deal with it, versus a Christian God, versus, multiple gods. All of that is in the non-random camp. But those are the only two camps. And so Professor Axe is correct on that. And so what the intelligent designer is saying is that with respect to those two camps, there's not enough good scientific evidence, and there never will be, given the observations that we have and the time frame in which those observations take place, to explain what we see with respect to life as a purely random process. So they're saying it can't be random, and so therefore it's not random. So if you disagree with this scientifically, you're free to do that. But that is the other argument, right? If it's not random, then we're in a space where we can argue other things like intelligent design or anything else, right? Anything else, nothing, right? Or theistic evolution, or Christianity, or any other thing. When we get to the space of origin, the unanswerable, unknowable domain where we cannot run tests, where we cannot falsify arguments, that domain, just as likewise with the origin of the universe, when we get to that space, we are free to postulate any other number of alternative explanations, including design, including any other number of things, because we're in a space that science can never reach. It doesn't reach, and it will never reach. And this is not just my opinion. Again, I've touched on this in earlier videos. This is understood by anybody who understands science. Understands like there are areas that we will never have the answer for. We will never know how life originally began. We will never know how the universe originally began. Okay, so kind of gone on long enough here. I'll come back and touch on some of these things here in a bit. Now, I know some people are going to push back on this. So let me just correct really quickly. I'm not arguing that the universe had a beginning. I know there are those who say the universe had no beginning. Again, what I will say is that whether the universe had a beginning or not is in that space where we have no ability to ever test, to ever falsify any theory. We will never know the answer to that. And so whatever theory you put forth there, the universe began, the universe always existed, or it's a multiverse, whatever it is in there is in the non-falsifiable camp. And in my point of view, neither no theory in the non-falsifiable camp is preferable to any other one. And that's the area where I believe we move out of the realm of science. Not that I believe. We actually move out of the realm of science, and we're into the realm of philosophy, theism, theology, and sort of any other kind of discussion set about being and purpose and everything else. We're out of the realm of the measurable and testable, etc. And just again, really quickly before we move on here, that's not the same as origin of life. We know life had a beginning on Earth. So want to be clear about that. We know life had a beginning. The universe beginning, it's we don't know, but life definitely began. And so with respect to that, there are explanations that are needed in order for us to understand that. So say enough on that, and we'll just move on here.
It's a scientific approach, not trying to reconcile science to scripture.
So hence we have old Earth intelligent design proponents and young Earth intelligent design proponents, even here at Biola Talbot School of Theology, because it's starting with a question, is there design in nature that's empirically observable?
Yeah.
And then the question is, how do we reconcile this with scripture?
Correct.
Basic difference. Okay.
So Doug, tell us, for our listeners who may not have thought about this much before, tell us a little bit more about what exactly is at stake in this debate over intelligent design.
Well, in the broader question of what's at stake on the question of are we created or are we cosmic accidents, just that is at stake. Who are we? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Which is huge. But are we asking, like, what's at stake if you take an ID position versus these other positions? I think what's at stake is your posture toward science. And we also haven't mentioned theistic evolution, so that's another one of these positions that's common out there within the Christian community.
Yeah, I just want to pause here on the theistic evolution point, because I fall somewhere between, as I've said, intelligent design and theistic evolution. And again, these camps they're so, they're necessary, but they kind of oversimplify a lot of issues. But just really quickly, when you think of theistic evolution, what you're talking about is a God, a creator who who created the universe and created the natural laws of the universe, the constants of the universe, the mathematics of the universe, the natural processes that govern how the universe is sort of formed and organized, including life. And so the theistic evolution person says, yes, there was a God who created the natural framework, but then the events that happen within that framework happen naturally, with very little input, if any, from God. That's a simplification, but that's the difference between that and intelligent design. And I'd say intelligent design argues that, in particular with the issue of human life, but also with the issue of sort of any life, that anywhere where we see so much complexity, if we were to wake up in the morning and see a Boeing 747 on our front lawn, we would know that some intelligent being created that or put that there. And that no amount of just disassembly of all the parts of that, throwing them to a vat and just saying, let's wait over time and take every single piece and wire and widget that goes into a 747, put them all in a big vat, and let's wait millions of years, and then over time and natural processes we'll get a 747. That argument, by the way, is a bit of a straw man argument from the standpoint of science. So I want to be clear. I know the scientists are listening to this, or they're pissed off. Look, I don't. That's not an argument that I would make. Okay, I'm just putting it out there as sort of the intelligent design, kind of explanation, and say that, which says that because we see that complexity, and we know that anywhere else where we see complexity like that, like a 747, and even the most basic elements of a single-celled organism has more complexity than a 747, which I think every scientist would agree with. Because we see wherever else we see that complexity, we associate it with intelligence and designer. We say, hey, we know that 747 was built by something intelligent. we should also say that for the complexity within life, even at the cellular level and below, subatomic level. That's, loosely the intelligent design argument, and that's how it's different from the theistic evolution argument. I'd say there is, and I think it's unfair to say that everything that the intelligent designer is arguing there is pseudoscience. That's just wrong. It's not accurate. It's ad hominem, and it's not fair. But I also think that there are other potential ways to kind of deal with complexity, and I think we have good science to show that we can reach complexity through purely natural processes. And so, again, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here and getting way down into the weeds where I didn't want to get to. But theistic evolution doesn't really have this issue, because theistic evolution is saying, yeah, sure, we're not saying that the complexity that we see comes necessarily from God. We're saying God created the natural processes that led to it, but then those processes that led to that complexity happen naturally. Again, there are problems there. The chief problem here that's really important. Again, everyone in any camp, the scientific camp, the creation camps, intelligent design, theistic evolution, the problem we all have to deal with, and this is where science has more common ground than discord, or at least it should, is that the period of time that we're talking about from when life first began on Earth, right? If you take the natural point of view and hold that, which I do, and it took billions of years for us to get the first thing that we would call life, and then from that point, about 400 million years to get to the complexity of life that we have today. The math on that is really challenging. Those again who've followed this channel know that I it's like, again, I mean, it's one of the beauties of the world. Math it's explanatory for me. It's descriptive, for me and for people who like math. And I've looked at the math here. I've tried to look at it from every angle, and it's just really challenging to argue that Darwin's theory of evolution, these sort of stepwise, gradual, incremental changes selected for over time through natural selection, could have led to the diversity and complex speciation that we're talking about on Earth in 400 million years. It doesn't work mathematically when you look at the amount of time that it would take. I've seen it. If someone wants to show me, says, hey, no, all that stuff is wrong. I've seen the math. Like, I don't have it right in front of me, but I've looked at this many, many times, and I've probed this. It does not work mathematically. I think that's not. I think it's dishonest to debate that, and so that doesn't mean God. And so this is where I think scientists get upset. It doesn't mean, okay, therefore God. What it means is we need to revise the theory, the naturalistic theories that we're using, to explain it in some other way. We have this period, this Cambrian explosion, where we see this sudden, broad diversification of life. We don't have the expected fossil record that we would expect to see for that. We need to explain that, because now you add that finding with the mathematical probabilities of how, just by purely natural processes, we could get to even much less complicated forms of life than human life in 400 million years, and the math is almost impossible. So you add that to the Cambrian explosion, which we don't have the fossil record to support, and so other issues like that. And it doesn't mean God. What it means is, per se, right? What it means is we need better theory than Darwin's theory, and I think that's what I believe Professor Axe was trying to maybe get to. Again, I'm trying to steelman his argument a bit here. His attack on Darwinism. I think he's saying it's like, if you're still sticking to just pure classical Darwinism or even neo-Darwinism, you got to move past that, because we again, Darwin didn't know what DNA was. Darwin didn't know, he didn't have a lot of the knowledge that we have today, and I think it's time to sort of update and revise the theory, and many scientists are doing this. And so I want to put that out there. And so where it is really challenging, again, and you know the word I'm using. I'm not saying it's entirely inexplicable, but we're going to need some other explanation than what we currently have for this sudden burst of complex life. And so where I come out is somewhere in between intelligent design and theistic evolution, which is why I think kind of the pigeonhole is sort of difficult for me to nail down. And I'll say I'm even still myself evolving on this, because I do believe that there are natural processes that run the world, for the most part on a day-to-day basis. And I believe for the most part, even my Christian concept of God just kind of lays off those processes and just, again, our mathematical concepts being one that are just universal and ethereal, in another conversation for another time, but also, gravity and sort of other things. I think, God, these are just things that exist, that God lays his hands off of, and including small, certainly at a species level, within a species, incremental, evolutionary processes, darkening of skin, or maybe lengthening of a neck within a species, or selecting for, longer wings or longer beak and things like that. I think that's well established. The science is really, really good on that. I think if you try to argue against that, it's tough. It's actually, it's more than tough. It's wrong. But as far as jumps within species, diversification of species, especially if you're arguing common ancestor, as Darwin did, it's that is really, really, really tough. And so for me, I say, well, theistic evolution can't explain that by itself. Can't explain how humans got here. Again, the math doesn't work. Intelligent design is, in my view, it's just not explanatory, because it's not, at least when we're talking about science. I have a hard time saying, therefore God. I know that's an oversimplification, but therefore God is never explanatory to me. So I'm happy to say, hey, there's an area we don't understand, so therefore insert anything. I'm fine with that. But but it doesn't prove, it can't prove a designer per se. I know I know where intelligent designers are going to push back in this, and I said, what you just said, it's either random or it's not, and we're saying, hey, all this evidence says that it's not random. So, and if it's not random, then there is some kind of designer. I know exactly what that argument is, and I'm sympathetic. That part of it I'm sympathetic to. I think where the challenge comes for me is that what is that designer? And it's fair to say that at least every prominent intelligent designer that I'm aware of is a Christian, right? Not even another theist, but an actual Christian. And I totally agree and accept that there's no attempt to kind of Trojan horse Christianity into the scientific argument by intelligent designers. I believe that. I accept that, at least amongst the main advocates. I do think that we have to be really careful if we're going to say, on the basis of intelligent design, there is a personal creator. I think that sort of oversteps. So if intelligent design is just purely, hey, look, it's not random, therefore it's something else, I'm on board with that. I can accept that. If it's anything more than that, an iota more than that, I'm going to struggle with that scientifically. Again, I'm fine with it as just personal belief. Insert belief into this unknown space, whatever you want to put in there, Christian God, Allah, Krishna, you want to put, impersonal God, whatever. I'm personally fine with that. So no issues there. So kind of, run on here a little bit. Let's just let a little bit more of this play, and then we'll wrap up. Again, I'll link the whole video in the description. It's a pretty good watch.
They have different postures with respect to scripture and different postures with respect to science. It can be the case, it's not always the case, that young earth creationists can say Scripture first. If I encounter something where it looks like science is in tension with Scripture, I chuck the science and I go with Scripture. And old Earth creationism could be that as well. I'm not saying that everyone is offering that, but that can be. Whereas intelligent design is saying, let's just look at the science carefully and see what the science actually says, and not spin it in the direction of materialism.
So one of the distinguishing marks of the intelligent design movement is that it specifically is not trying to do that harmonization of science and Scripture.
Yeah.
So I think this is fair. I think that's a fair characterization, and I'll wrap up here. Just a short video. I just wanted to get out, just to get some content out while I'm working on the bigger project. But I will wrap up here. I do think intelligent design, again, the chief advocates, the ones who really dig into the science, are not, despite their backgrounds as Christians, are not trying to reconcile Christianity with science. I think that is fair. I believe that, and I think it's unfair to position them otherwise. It's not pseudoscience. That's false. It's not pseudoscience. I think attacking the people who are intelligent design advocates, theistic evolutionists, even young and old Earth creationists, I think attacking people on these belief systems is something that I really bristle against. I'm strongly against that for a large number of reasons. I have no problem with creationists. I don't have anything against them. I'm not in that camp at all. I'll probably never be in that camp. But I have no problem with the people in that camp. I have no problem with people in the camp of atheism who are genuinely there because they just cannot get themselves to believe that there's something bigger, or they don't believe, again, that there is. I have no problem with intelligent design, no problem with theistic evolution. What I have a problem with always are bad arguments by any camp. And so the second I see an argument that's bad, I'm going to attack it. And when there are bad arguments that I feel like are driven by bad motivations, I'm going to mercilessly attack it and obliterate it. I will absolutely massacre it, and will make it a goal to destroy arguments like that. And so, because I think what we need more of is to allow the differences that we have to be discussed openly and freely, and to recognize and embrace those differences respectfully. Deal with arguments. Arguments are impersonal. They don't deserve any kind of kid gloves. Like we can, I believe, maybe others disagree with it, but I believe you can take an argument and just smash it, right? You don't owe it anything. But the person behind it, the person making it, is a human being, and unless they have clearly demonstrated bad motivations, that human being should not be attacked. And particularly ad hominem attacks, where we say, we're just not going to listen to anything you say because you said you were a Christian or you said you were an atheist. I just think that goes too far. So I just, I'll probably just wrap up here. I think I've been kind of rambling on here long enough. All the normal stuff, please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Stay tuned. I'm working on several really kind of fun things that I hope to share with you all. But in the meantime, have a great day.